All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unpack the fundamental story of how different substances, hijack our brain chemistry. From your daily cup of coffee to the most intense hallucinogens, you're going to see how they all follow a surprisingly similar script.
And this right here is the core idea for our whole explainer. Think about it like a play that always has 3 acts. You've got the onset, the peak, and then the come down. Every substance we're going to talk about, each character, plays these parts a little differently. But the plot is always the same, a temporary tweak to your brain chemistry for which you always have to pay a price.
So to really get this story, we've got to start with the one character that almost everybody knows. It's the most popular psychoactive drug on the planet, and honestly, it's the perfect way to see how this whole chemical drama plays out in our brains every single day.
First up, let's talk about the stimulants, or as we're calling them, the uppers. The theme here is pretty straightforward. They offer you a loan of energy, focus, and confidence. But, like any loan, it has to be paid back, and usually with some pretty high interest.
So how does caffeine actually work? Well, it doesn't give you energy. It's more of a trickster. It works by blocking a chemical in your brain called adenosine. That's the stuff that makes you feel tired. So by basically hiding your exhaustion, your neurons start firing faster, and boom, within about 30 minutes, you hit that peak. You're focused, you're motivated. But that adenosine, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's just been waiting in the wings. Once the caffeine wears off, it all comes flooding back at once. And that is the crash. That foggy, irritable feeling? Yep, that's the bill for your borrowed alertness.
Okay, to understand the more powerful uppers, we need to meet the real star of this show, dopamine. This is your brain's, hey, good job chemical. It's what drives your motivation, your focus, your feelings of pleasure. It's the system in your brain that says, whatever you just did, do that again. And it's the very system that so many of these other drugs learn to hijack.
Which brings us to nicotine. What's so wild about this is how it captures the perfect trap. That feeling of calm a smoker gets, it's not really relaxation, it's just a little hit of dopamine that temporarily relieves the craving that was created by the last dose. So the drug creates the itch, and then it offers to scratch it, keeping you locked in this constant loop of withdrawal and relief.
Now cocaine takes that dopamine hijack to a whole new level. It basically acts like a dam in your brain, stopping it from reabsorbing its own dopamine. So what happens? You get an instant, massive flood of euphoria and confidence. But here's the catch. Because it's just trapping what's already there, the supply runs out fast. The peak is incredibly intense, but the high lasts for a very short time, which leads to a sudden, really hard crash.
So let's compare cocaine to its, let's call it more destructive cousin, methamphetamine. Just look at the duration. We're talking minutes versus hours, and this shows you the key difference in how they work. While cocaine just blocks the drain, meth kicks open the floodgates. It forces your neurons to dump their entire supply of dopamine all at once. And that fire hose effect isn't just way longer lasting, it's also incredibly neurotoxic. It physically damages the brain's wiring.
And this really is the bottom line for all these powerful stimulants. That feeling of infinite energy, that godlike confidence, it doesn't come from nowhere. It's just a cash advance on your own future happiness, your own health, and your own well-being. And that debt is huge. It always comes due.
So, if the uppers are all about taking out a high-interest loan on energy, our next category, the downers, is about borrowing something else entirely. This is a loan of calm, of quiet, of relief. But the tricky thing is, this borrowed peace can become a necessity really, really fast.
Let's talk about alcohol, the world's favorite social lubricant. It works by slowing down the communication between your brain cells. That's what gives you that initial, warm, relaxed feeling. But as you hit that peak, that slowing down also messes with your judgment and coordination. The big illusion is that you feel more confident and in control, when in reality, you're actively losing it. The come down, the hangover, that's just your brain desperately trying to rebalance its own chemistry.
Opioids, on the other hand, offer a much deeper sense of calm. They latch onto receptors that block pain signals and trigger a massive release of euphoria. People often describe it like being wrapped in a warm, perfectly safe blanket. But the withdrawal is the absolute opposite of that. Every nerve ending feels raw. Life without the drug becomes physically and emotionally unbearable because your brain's survival system gets rewired to believe that the drug is just as essential as oxygen.
Then you have benzodiazepines, or benzos. They work by cranking up the volume on GABA,
which is your brain's natural braking system. So they don't really create calm, they just amplify what's there, effectively silencing anxiety. But the brain is, well, it's efficient. If an outside chemical is doing the job of calming it down, it just stops doing that job on its own. And that leads to tolerance, where the brain becomes dependent on the drug just to feel normal.
All right, our final category, the shifters. These substances don't just turn the volume up or down on your brain. They change the song completely. They offer a loan of perception, altering reality itself.
Cannabis is probably the shifter most people are familiar with. Its main ingredient, THC, plugs into a system that helps regulate our mood and how we perceive things. The result? A pretty gentle distortion of reality. Time might feel like it's slowing down, your senses get a little sharper, and suddenly normal things can seem hilarious or deeply profound. It's a subtle shift, but a significant one.
Now, to understand the more powerful shifters, we need to introduce our last key chemical, serotonin. Think of this as the molecule of mood, of well-being, and of social connection. It helps you feel like you belong in the world. And it's the primary target for some of the most profound psychoactive drugs out there.
This chart perfectly visualizes what happens on MDMA. Just like meth does with dopamine, MDMA forces your brain to release a massive flood of its serotonin. And that's the peak, that overwhelming feeling of empathy, connection, and pure joy. But look at what happens after. You've completely emptied the tank. This leads to a deep crash in the days that follow, where mood and any sense of connection can feel totally gone.
Classic hallucinogens like LSD and psilocybin from magic mushrooms, they work differently. They don't just dump all your serotonin. They actually bind to the receptors and disrupt the brain's normal patterns of communication. This can lead to these incredible shifts where the rigid sense of I, your ego, can temporarily dissolve, and the boundary between you and the rest of the world just kind of blurs.
And that gets us to a really crucial point about these experiences. The drug isn't like a movie projector that's creating images out of thin air. It's more like a key that unlocks doors to parts of your own mind. The experience, whether it's blissful or absolutely terrifying, is really just a reflection of what's already inside the user.
Ketamine is in a class all its own. It's a dissociative, so instead of flooding the brain with chemicals, it blocks a key messenger called glutamate, which pretty much cuts off sensory input from the outside world. This can make everything feel distant, and at higher doses, it can lead to what people call the K-hole, a feeling that your mind is completely detached from your body. It disconnects you from pain, sure, but also from reality itself.
So, after our tour through the uppers, the downers, and the shifters, where does that leave us? Well, it leaves us with one single unifying idea, the chemical price that has to be paid.
So here's the unifying principle. Every single substance we've talked about offers a shortcut to a feeling we want, whether that's energy, calm, connection, or a different perception. But these feelings are borrowed from your brain's natural reserves. The crash, the hangover, the withdrawal, that's just the price. That's your brain trying to balance the books, because its one unbreakable rule is that it will always try to get back to its normal baseline.
Ultimately, this isn't about labeling drugs as good or bad. It's about seeing the mechanism for what it is. Each one kicks off a predictable chemical transaction with a very clear cause and a very clear effect. The story is just one of chemistry, not morality.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. When we change our brain chemistry, are we really escaping the world? Or are these chemicals just a strange and powerful mirror, showing us the hidden potential and the deep vulnerabilities that are already wired inside our own minds?